more than 500,000 words and over 20,000 recordings. I didn't speak them to get better at speaking. I was just prompting AI. But after a year, something changed. I became a better speaker. And I didn't even try. Now, I know that sounds like one of those self-help claims, the woo-woo stuff that just falls apart the second you think about it. So let me explain what actually happened, why I think it works, and where I see it showing up in real conversations outside of AI. If you use AI every day, especially if you're doing voice to text, you might already be practicing a skill that you don't realize. Because if you're using voice to text like me and you're speaking out every prompt, those prompts contain full explanations. It involves you explaining context and background of what you've tried, what needs to be achieved, and so on. It forces you to organize your thoughts in real time as you're speaking. So you have to choose your words, you have to structure it like when you're talking to a human so that the human actually understands, and you have to try and be clear. And the thing is, if you talk to AI, just like how you would talk to a human, but you do this hundreds of times a day, over and over, then that is speaking practice. So it's just gonna be a flywheel that goes on and on and on, right? So you prompt, so you speak your intent, and then you send it over to the AI and you see that the output's not quite right, and then you would have to re-explain, like you said, no, what I meant by X is actually Y, so maybe let's correct this piece of information in your output and change this section up, and so on. And then you send that prompt again, you get the output. So it's just gonna go on and on and on. And this ties into the concept of deliberate practice, where practicing with intention actually accelerates skill development. Because why wouldn't it, right? It makes perfect sense. I heard another quote about this where they say that practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. So if you actually try to speak clearly, because you're trying to explain things clearly to AI, then you will end up learning how to explain things clearly in general whenever you're speaking. This is just like when you read a lot. You read not because you want to get better at reading, but you read because you're interested in the material. But after years of reading, you increase and improve your vocabulary, and you end up knowing words that most people don't. And that's the same with prompting using voice to text. So you prompt to get work done, but after doing this for a very long time and speaking a lot of words, then you just end up being a better speaker, especially because you're speaking in a way to like give instructions or explain things clearly. Then you get better at giving instructions and explaining things clearly. It only makes sense. So I actually made an entire video about why and how I do voice to text. So I'll link it somewhere up here. I call it the press, talk, and paste method. I mapped out my voice to text into one button on my mouse. And then if I click that mouse, you can see that my voice to text software, in this case Super Whisper, it appeared on the screen. So now you can see the waves, like it's capturing what I'm saying, right? And then when I click it again, it pastes what I said, the transcription, wherever my cursor is. There you go. So I started doing this for better AI output in general, and because I know that more context means better AI output most of the time. But throughout the time I was doing this, I noticed small gradual improvements to my speaking, and that was completely unexpected, but a very nice bonus. So I started noticing this at work actually. So I'm a product manager and I work with products that have complex systems, or like if and then change, like if this happens, then this happens. And I even work with stakeholders that English isn't really their first language. I noticed that over time, I can actually explain these complex systems to non-technical stakeholders. Their first language isn't even English, and it still lands for them, and they can still understand. And again, we go back, when I was explaining things to AI every time I prompt, It's basically the same kind of thinking. I try to be as structured as possible and provide as much context as possible so that the AI understands what output or what result I want. Now, I was able to directly apply all of that practice I did when talking to people. And there's research by this guy named Vygotsky, probably butchered that pronunciation. To get better at speaking, it's not just about practicing speaking. It's about practicing thinking out loud. And thinking out loud transfers everywhere. And the thing is, if you think out loud or if you speak, then it creates connections that you wouldn't have necessarily made while just like typing it out or even just like sitting and thinking about. And again, this applies to so many things. Like it will improve your thinking in general. It will improve any type of structured writing you do, like emails. If you're presenting, you're better with presenting ideas on the fly. And if you're conversing, then you can get to your point quicker and more concisely just because of all of this practice that you get from voice to text prompting. For presenting, like I noticed this myself. Before I used to need like my entire script written down before I shoot a YouTube video, right? But now I'm just relying on the slides that I made and I can structure my ideas on the fly. And the argument there is maybe you just got better at making YouTube videos. Okay, yeah, that's fair. But I don't see a world where more than 500,000 words, structured words for that matter, that I spoke did not make a difference in improving my speaking ability. It just can't. That's more than 500,000 words of volume that I instead would have not said. And it's not just basically 500,000 words of yapping. It's 500,000 words of actually like trying to communicate my intent and what I need in a structured way. It's literally free practice. It's not like you even have to set aside time to practice speaking. You're just practicing while you're doing something else, in this case, prompting AI. So you don't need to buy any course. There's no exercises or extra time. It's really just baked into your workflow. And I can even argue that it will even make you faster instead of typing out your prompts. And why it's great practice is because every prompt is allowing you to practice articulation and structured thinking, which also directly relates to the work that you're already doing. So you actually also get better at expressing things related to your job. So if you get better at that, it transfers everywhere. And really the most important thing to remember here is you won't just get better at prompting AI, you'll get better at speaking and talking to people in general. And if you want to know why voice prompting gives you better AI output and how to start doing it today, then make sure to check out this video. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe.